Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and wrap up viruses here. So we left off last time, pretty long video about viruses and the types of replication that they can do and how they can kind of hang out and host for a long time. So now we're going to talk about viruses as human pathogens. We could spend a long time on plants and animals, but we're going to focus on people because that's pretty interesting to most of us, I would think. So infection occurs when one organism enters another and replicates inside of it. That's how we define infection for viruses in humans. An infectious disease occurs when the host's normal functions are disrupted. And so the cells that should be doing their normal jobs are now making viruses, and as a result, the person is sick. And so a disease vector is an animal that carries the pathogen from host to host. And so that's what a vector is. Biting insects, certainly mosquitoes are a vector for a lot of viral diseases, but ticks can do this as well. Because, of course, when a mosquito or a tick drinks blood or takes blood from a human and then or an animal and then later bites a human, it can get some of those viruses, virions, into the human and infect them. And so that's how these things can be a vector for disease. So some common viral diseases, a lot of viral diseases are going to produce pretty mild symptoms, fever, stomach ache, chills, body aches, just think the cold, flu, that kind of stuff, usually subside pretty quickly. Um, you're going to be able to kick a lot of this stuff in about a week, maybe two. Um, some of our viruses can remain in the body in a long time. I gave the example of the cold sore that hangs out forever, herpes simplex virus, HSV1 is the virus that's responsible for chickenpox. So herpes, chickenpox, genital herpes, cold sores, whole bunch of different herpes viruses. And like I'd already mentioned in the last video, later in life, when it leaves the lysogenic phase, 50 years later and comes back to the lytic phase, you get shingles. So that's not too much fun. Some viral infections can increase the risk of cancer, like HPV. Super common for folks to get HPV vaccinations now, and that's human papillomavirus, which increases the rate of, I think, cervical cancer, but I might be wrong. So emerging viral diseases are either emerging, they're expanding their range, or they're new to a species or new within a range of that species. And so for us, we're looking at viruses that haven't been an issue for humans and are becoming an issue for humans. And so one that was a really big deal when I was in, I don't know, middle school, maybe just starting high school, was West Nile disease. And everybody in my town was talking about it. It was a big deal. And so, first identified in humans, 1981. It spread to North America in 1999. And it covered, America in just no time, really. We had 5,000 cases in 2012, and it was transmitted by mosquitoes, and we knew it was transmitted by mosquitoes, and people in my hometown, they were talking about it, and about bug spray, and not getting bit by mosquitoes, and we had one kid get it, and he had an insanely high fever, and people were getting pretty freaked out that, we were going to die of West Nile, and things of that nature, and so it was kind of a big deal. I think maybe we were a bit more worried about it than it necessarily. We only had one kid get it, but it was kind of a big deal because it was new. And anytime we get a disease that's new, there's a learning curve with it, and so we're certainly facing that with West Nile. The Ebola virus is first isolated in 76. The picture of the Ebola virus was on this really famous movie called Outbreak, and it's about this scary little virus that makes it from animals to people, and it never gets to America, and then it gets to America, and then everyone's sick, and oh, it's very exciting and all of this. And with the exception of the really cool helicopter chase and the cute little monkey, that actually did happen. Yeah, it is very contagious in humans, the Ebola virus. And that's the picture they used in their little movie they made back in the 80s. And the outbreaks are limited to Africa to date. Not true. When this book was published, that was true last year, I think. If I'm going to use these videos each year, this won't be very good. How about 2015? Sure. We had Ebola in America, a few cases, and was able to be confined. It didn't spread, but it causes hemorrhagic disease where you start to bleed internally, eternally. Sorry, bleed internally inside of your body. You start to bleed and hemorrhage, and the mortality rates they were saying were incredibly high in developing countries, but I think in developed countries the mortality rate is quite a bit lower. In the developing countries, the data we had mortality close to 90%. And of the few cases that made it back to America, I think they both survived. So I guess we have a lot more to learn about that virus. So viral mutation, viral genomes can be altered by mutation, just like any genome can be altered by mutation. I mean, your genome can be altered by mutation, but like I mentioned before, we're constantly proofreading and checking for errors and repairing these errors. And viruses really aren't. They just take up what they can and go with it. And HIV and influenza mutate especially quickly. This might be because they're, an exception to the rule for viruses. This might be because HIV and influenza get so much attention and funding that we've really studied both of these very well, and we might just understand them better than we do a lot of other viruses. So the new flu shot vaccine, we have to make one every single year to keep up with new mutations and to keep up with what these viruses have pulled in from their hosts as well. And so each year you get your flu shot, you're getting um, the prediction of what strains we think are going to be most prevalent. And so your flu shot might give you on the average 60 to 70% coverage against the flu strains that are traveling across our country. It might give you 98%. We just really don't know, and so we make our very best guess for that. But the flu is caused by many different types of viruses, so it becomes very difficult to get one little injection that's going to protect someone against all of these. And so the viral reassortment is the swapping of genes between viruses that infect a host at the same time. So an animal or a human gets infected with a virus and becomes sick, and at the same time it becomes infected with another virus. And as these viruses are being built in the host cell, you get viruses, or rather DNA from one virus and DNA from another virus that get put into the same capsid, and you can, by happy accident, make a brand new virus that has never been seen before, and that's called reassortment because we're reassorting what genes were in what virus. And that caused H1N1 in 2009. It caused a big epidemic in Mexico. It was fatal. It freaked people out. It freaked people out in Mexico. It freaked people out in America. And it was a very difficult thing to treat because you can't use antibiotics on a virus. Viruses aren't alive by most definitions, so you just treat the symptoms. You're hot, well, we'll try to cool you down with, cold packs or fever-reducing drugs or whatever, but as far as the virus itself, in many cases, it really has to run its course, and so that can be a real challenge when the virus is new. So there are a few other viruses that have been made lately, and we have to name them from their proteins. That's why you get the H and the N. So H5N1 is a strain of influenza in birds, and it's been in birds for a long time, we're assuming, and it actually was able to infect people, but the people could only be infected when they were actually in contact with these infected birds. And so that was, I mean, I don't want to say it's good, but that was kind of okay because you actually have to be working with birds to get sick. And the bad thing about it was there's a really high death rate. It had about 60% fatality in humans, which is insanely high. More than half the people who get it will die, but it doesn't transfer from people to people. It just transfers from birds to people. So as long as you're not handling birds, you're probably okay. Now, we have H5N1, which is the avian flu, basically, and we have H1N1, which I think was called swine flu, but that's not really accurate because there was a whole bunch of different pieces in it. And so what we get is H1N1 didn't kill 60% of people, not even close, but it was very, very transmissible between human to human to human kind of thing. H5N1 was very, very deadly, but it didn't transmit from person to person. And so what we get is we have two types of flu viruses that are different from one another, and we have a recipe for potential disaster because what if somebody gets infected with H5N1 and while they are sick they are also infected with H1N1? If by this very misfortunate event we were to do some reassortment and build a new virus, we could build a virus out of some of the genetics from H5N1 and some of the genetics from H1N1, and we could get a virus that's going to kill 60% of people and spreads quickly from person to person. And so we could get a quick moving, very fatal virus, and then 50-60% of us might be in a lot of trouble. And so there's the risk that we're looking ahead at. So a few virus pictures for you before we're all done with viruses. This is the chickenpox virus, and there's your little kiddo. It's normally when they get it. You can see these little pustules forming all over this child that I'm sure are very itchy and miserable, and now later in her life she may very well have shingles. Here is I think, scanning electron micrograph of Ebola virus, and very similar to the picture they used in that old 80s movie Outbreak, or early 90s, whenever. Here's tobacco mosaic virus, first virus isolated. You have on the left a very healthy tobacco plant, big green leaves, it's growing well. Here on the right you have tobacco mosaic virus. The stem is essentially pretty comparable, but the leaves are pretty thin, they're very weak, and you see they're mottled with these white spots. And those white spots are the virus where it's sick. Not unlike this little girl's white spots all over her, right? So you can kind of see some similarities. All right, so we're going to shut it off there, and we'll pick back up with bacteria next time. So thanks for your time.